Hi guys, welcome to my channel. This is my first video and I hope that you guys can get something good out of this that I will be sharing from now on every Sunday. First of all, I know there's a few of you who don't really know me yet, and thank you for subscribing. And I know there's a lot of you who are just my day-to-day friends, and I appreciate your support. I am trying to do this so that hopefully I can help others with some of the struggles that I have overcome in my life. And let's just dive into it. Like I said, my name is Veronica for those who barely know me, and I am 37 years old. I will be 37 years old pretty soon. So I'm excited to live one more year, and that my birthday is coming pretty soon. I would like to talk to you guys about first where I come from and my story, just because I think it's important for future videos that I will be making, so that you guys are not like, well, what does this girl know about what she's talking about? Or, you know, like what did she struggle with that makes her say that, or makes her think like that, or makes her act like that, etc. Anyway, so my story is, I will try to be brief and not get emotional. We all have a story, and I was born in Mexico. I actually moved to the States when I was around 11 years old. My childhood was pretty happy. I was a happy kid, adventurous, always running around, having fun with friends, and my imagination was just, had no limits. I was like super happy. I grew up in a little town in Mexico with my mom and dad and my 3 siblings, and at the age of 5 is when I began to notice that there was abuse in my home. There was domestic violence, and I couldn't understand it, and I didn't know what was happening. I could see my mom hurting, but I didn't understand why, or I was just too little, too young. And so a few days would go by and I would just forget about what happened and kind of go on living my own life, my little life of a happy kid. But I do remember that sometimes my father would take out his anger on us, myself and my siblings, and sometimes we got some pretty harsh beatings. And I just couldn't understand what I was doing wrong or what I had done wrong to deserve that kind of beating. It wasn't just a spanking, it was literally punches and hits, and many times my mom would just get in the way and try to defend us, and she would get the beatings herself, and it was just pretty insane to witness. After a while, my mother could no longer deal with that kind of lifestyle, and she decided to put an end to it, thankfully for us and for herself. And so she decided to leave my father, and the last memory I have of him is when I was about 9 or 10, and he was angry, leaving to pick up some tools in order to tear down our home. He was angry that we were leaving him, and that's my last memory. I saw him walking up the hill, and I never saw him again. Till this day, I haven't seen him again. I was sad that we were leaving, but I just didn't know what was happening. And so with that move, my mother began to work, and she was a single mom, and we were staying close to my grandmother's house. And I remember my first case of sexual harassment was when I was around 7 or 8, I would say. It also just kind of shook me my whole little world, because I had no idea. It seems, even until this day, it seems like a nightmare. Like it didn't really happen, but I know it happened. And again, my mom stood up for us, and she did the right thing and defended us. And I remember that was probably the thing that kind of just left me very unsure of, am I safe? What's happening with my life? Even though I'm so little, like, why are all these changes happening? Is it my fault? Did I do something wrong? And so from 5 years old up into 10 years old, I was a happy kid, but also blinded by innocence, because I just didn't have the knowledge, the experience to understand what was happening. And really nobody took the time to explain me anything. I think that's part of the culture, how you grow up over there. You just, if you're a kid, you just kind of deal with the things that are handed to you, and nobody ever tells you anything or explains you anything. At 10 years old, at around 10 years old, my mom began to date again, and she met a nice man, and he was very kind to her and loving, and just promised her the world. And she was surprised that another person would take her with 4 children and want to be with her and marry her. And so his idea was to move all of us to the States, to Phoenix, Arizona. And so she did the move, she agreed, they began dating. We actually stayed in Mexico, my siblings and I, with my grandmother for a few months. She came first so that she could kind of find a home and settle down here, and then she would go back for us. That was probably the hardest 8 months of my life as a child, because I was suddenly without both of my parents, and I didn't understand what was happening. Again, I was just completely torn apart. But after we moved to Phoenix, everything was fine. We started school. I think my first word in English was food. I love food, and that was the first word that I learned. So it was just a whole new life. It was exciting to be here, somewhere where I knew nothing about it. It was just like a whole new world coming to discover this adventure. So everything was fine for a few years, and then I began to go through more verbal abuse with my stepdad, and the verbal abuse turned into psychological, emotional, and eventually sexual harassment. And that was probably what triggered everything, like all the loneliness and depression and sadness and suicidal and cutting for relief and just all those horrible things that nobody ever wants in their lives. That was what triggered everything for me to be able to have had something so strong, so young in my life, without anyone to kind of walk me through it. That's pretty tough. So I'm glad that I'm here today to share my story, and hopefully you guys can invite your friends and share it, my video, and maybe together we can give someone else hope, because it's sad to hear that so many people are committing suicide, or they just can't handle life anymore. And hopefully, if we just share our story, we can enlighten others that it is possible to live through such adversity and through such trials. I think that it is important for us to reach out to everyone, not just our friends and family. And I think that in my next video, part 2, you will get to hear all about these little horrible incidents that happened, and then we can move on to my life of having fun, my everyday life, and how I managed to find happiness and seek happiness for good.